We ready? Okay, so my name's Samantha. I'm going to talk to you about women in technology. I'm going to talk you through my personal journey, and I'm going to tell you how it took me 623 days to go from conception of having your own business in the region, being a woman in tech, obviously, and the current state of the STEM landscape. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths. And what that means for the working woman regionally and internationally. And I'm also going to be talking to you about the effectiveness of taking an offline industry online. So we're going to start with a quote. It's not that we use technology, it's that we live technology. This is true. 80% of our interactions on a day-to-day basis have some form of technological element, whether that's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whether you're clocking in and clocking out of a building. There's a tech element involved in 80% of what you do. So when we talk about women in technology, are you expecting kind of what the media wants to show you, what TVs, what movies want to show you, which is the stereotype that tends to sway from two different landscapes. So that's either the woman who works in IT in your building, who helps you fix your printer and your computer, or you're thinking of some sort of spy kind of James Bond code cracking woman. That's not the reality. These are the faces of women in tech. These are three of actually my personal heroes that I'd like to introduce you to. So number one, we have Whitney Wolfe. So Whitney Wolfe was one of the founding members of Tinder, which is a dating app. What happened was she actually was wrongfully terminated. She sued Tinder for quite a lot of money. And what she did was decide to start her own competitive app. And she did this in a very, very smart way. Rather than creating what was effectively Tinder 2.0, she made a list of everything she didn't like about the app, everything that didn't work for her, and instead created a solution to those problems. She's now worth $4 billion. In the middle, we have Tracy Young. She's the CEO of PlanGrid. So again, it's another circumstance of a problem, and she created a solution. So she worked in the architectural landscape, and she saw that a lot of designers and architects were using blueprints to create buildings, interiors, et cetera, and they were expensive to make. You couldn't digitize them. You sort of had to send them by fax, or you could scan them and send them by email. And she thought to herself, there has to be an easier way than this. So she created PlanGrid with her partner. And she went through many, many different trials to actually create this app and what was a desktop application as well. But eventually, she got it right after 3 or 4 sessions, and again, she's now worth several billion. And the last person on the end is Jen Fitzpatrick, one of my personal heroes. She's the vice president of Google Maps. So she's one of the first people that actually thought, who's using Google Maps? How are they using it? And what we're going to do is we're going to take the majority of Google Maps offline, which is something for when people are working in tech is almost a taboo word. When you're working in tech, you want to actually make things more interactive. But she was smart enough, clever enough, and knew the landscape enough to turn around and say, I'm actually going to take a relatively online industry and actually turn it offline. She's still one of my heroes in tech. When Marissa Mayer was still at Google, obviously she then went to Yahoo, they came up with a system together where for every senior role that was interviewed at Google or Yahoo, at least one of those candidates had to be female. So she was constantly promoting gender diversity as well. So a little bit about myself. I've lived in the region for 20 years now. I've lived in Saudi Arabia, and then I've lived in Dubai for the last 10. I actually grew up in Jeddah in Saudi. My degree is in journalism. So before I launched my app 2 years ago, I had absolutely no idea about technology, no training, didn't even take IT as a GCSE, knew nothing about it, but dove headfirst into the landscape. So I started. And I still don't know how Apple TV works. And that's absolutely fine. I can work in a technology industry and still not know how to do an Excel spreadsheet, and that's absolutely fine, because I'm not coming to you as some sort of Marissa Mayer, Mark Zuckerberg hybrid. I'm coming to you as the normal, everyday person who perhaps didn't take technology or computing as a degree, but still managed to carve out a career in tech. It's a beauty salon booking app. So I went with the industry that I knew, which was beauty salons. I was a beauty editor previously at Emirates Woman magazine, and that's when I left to actually launch my app. So 623 days. That's how long it took me from handing in my resignation, deciding I wanted to start an app, to actually signing a contract for the sale of my app. So let me tell you a little bit about BEAM. So BEAM is B-E-E-M. It stands for Beauty Emergency. That actually came from the subject line of an email that I had from a colleague that said, beauty emergency. I need to book a manicure, a pedicure, a wax, etc., and I don't know how to do it. No one's answering the phone. No one speaks English. It's just a very confusing landscape for me. And I had this light bulb moment, and I said, you know what? The same way that we have, Careem was really up and coming at the time. The same way that we have Careem, we have all these services on demand. We need to have beauty on demand. And that was my first sort of conception for BEAM. So from that, it took me 30 days. It took me 30 days to hand in my resignation, buy the domain name for my website, print off business cards, and go to the local stationery store to find the letters of my company in wood and paint them pink, because apparently that's a really important part of business when you first start. It obviously wasn't. There's only one of those things that I needed to do, which was buy my domain name, but I was excited. I wanted to learn more about the landscape, and that was my very first failure. So how BEAM was born, obviously, like I said, I saw a gap in the market. No one had done this. Everybody who was talking to me about this was coming from a US or a UK perspective. Now, regionally, we've seen business models internationally come here, try and be adapted, and fail. Having grown up here and having spent 20 years here, I knew how to tackle this problem, and I was going to do it my way. So the first thing I did is I spoke to my consumers before I even started. Now, for me, those were nail salon owners. So I knew them well enough from my previous roles to actually go and sit down and say to them, I'm going to take you for coffee. I have this idea. I'm going to take you through every single step of it. You don't have to sign an NDA. We're not going to make this formal. But what I want to know from you is, if I did make this, how should I make it? What would be good for you? What would not be good for you? What would work? What would be a pain? How can I make this app the easiest thing you've ever integrated into your business? How can I make you need it so much you didn't even know? What I then did was I went to every single free event for because at that point, I still didn't know what my budget was. I didn't know what I was making. But what I did need to know was what the landscape's like. Who's working in it? How many women are working in it? Can I find a mentor? Is there someone that's already working on this app that I didn't even know about? The next thing I did was Googled. Google is my best friend. I really honestly mean that I had no idea how to even start this project. And the first thing I did was Google how to build an app. Admittedly, it wasn't that helpful, but what it did was lead on to links to links to links, and took some time, and eventually I found websites like neilpatel.com, Canva, all these free, amazing resources that not necessarily help me build an app, but they help me build a business, and that's just as important. The next thing I did was hire, because I was excited again, and I wanted to grow my team, and I wanted to prove to everyone we're really getting this off the ground. I'm going to have a team of 20 in the next 10 months, etc. And within 2 months, I ended up firing everyone because I hired wrong. I was so excited. I just wanted to have a team. So the next thing I did was hired again, but I hired better and I hired smarter. That's another thing about business, is that for every success, I probably had about 5 failures. And that's so important. And the longer you stay in this industry, and whether it's tech or business itself, the more you will fail, and the better you will be for it. Finally, I created what I knew, and I pulled in favors. So, for example, my app launched 4 months late, which is not good when you've been talking about it for the previous 6 months. So what I did was I said to friends who were in the industry, okay, I've built this Instagram page. I've told everyone that the app's launching in 2 weeks. We did a countdown, etc. It's not launching. How do I keep this social media, digital sort of following that I've got? How do I keep them interested? How do I stop them unfollowing when they find out that the app's actually not going to launch for another 4 months? So what I did was pulled in favors, said to friends who are in the beauty industry, give me 100 dirhams worth of products, and I will promote you all over my social media. in return for that 100 dirhams. And I have a nice database. This is women who really care about technology, they care about beauty, they could be your target customers in future. Just give me 100 dirhams worth of face masks, moisturizers, whatever it is. And they did. So I started doing competitions. So in the 4 months before I launched my app, I did, I think, about 6 competitions. And it was good. It kept everybody engaged, it kept everybody excited, it kept everybody wanting more. Ooh, this is embarrassing to look at. So that was Beam when I first started. That was what I was excited about. Obviously, looking at it now, it's a little bit different. Looking at it then, it looks like sort of a 1920s magazine cover. But I really mean it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know. I just wanted to build this app, and I thought I had a clue, and I thought I could do it all myself. This is a really, really important lesson in failure. So another important lesson that I learned is actually the first day that my app launched, it didn't work. And again, I'd made such a fanfare, I'd made such a fuss, everybody download it, everybody book a beauty treatment, please, you'd really support me if you did, all my friends downloaded it. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because I launched on day 1. What I should have done, and which anybody who's ever had a business before knows, is you soft launch. Launch and don't tell anyone. Iron out all the kinks, make sure that you know what you're doing, make sure that from a technology perspective, your app is working on all systems, all software. You don't have to then tell your consumer, please download this, please add that, please make sure your phone is 50% charged, etc., etc. So that was one of many. And they don't look like that. That works. So if you're going into technology and you want to build a website, you want to build an app, you want to build anything to do with that sphere, look at the models that are popular. If you want to build your own search engine, look at why Google's popular. There's nothing else you can do on the Google landing page than put something in that bar. There's a reason for that. So these are a few lessons that I'd learned. Again, Google is your best friend. Number 2 is learn. There's so many free online resources nowadays. You can learn anything in 30 days. Obviously, you can pay, you can do sort of an online university or an online course, but in reality, there's a lot of free tester courses that they do, maybe 15 days, 10 days, people doing presentations that they've put up online. There's so much information out there to learn that you can do yourself. Networking and immersing yourself in the ecosystem and staying on top of current trends. This comes back to investors. So, for example, if you work in technology and you don't know that Amazon.com just bought Souk.com and you bump into an investor, you're in trouble because this is what everyone's talking about. So my background being fashion and beauty, I now needed to change my narrative. I now needed to not just be talking to my colleagues, but talking to my friends, talking to everybody, keeping this narrative alive so that the next time I did accidentally bump into an investor who looked like normal people, they don't look like investors, I had something to say, and I had something important to say. Don't go to every expensive seminar and workshop. The amount of emails that I got when people find out you work in tech or you have an app, 3,000 dirham a day course in the States, 2,000 dirham weekend, and all we're going to do is learn how to code and study apps. From my experience, don't do it. I don't think it's useful. I don't think it's a good use of your money. If you have unlimited funds, fair enough. But really from day 1, again, once you do finally get an investor, which you will have to look at some point, whether that's a business loan or a silent partner, they're going to want to know how you spent your money from day 1. And if from day 1 you spent 6,000 dirhams on a course that you could have either done online or you could have done the research yourself, that's not showing good money management. The last point is adapt. So when I started Beam, I wanted to create a beauty ecosystem. And I thought when I first launched, I'm going to have this online sort of e-commerce app where you can book a manicure, but you can also buy nail polish, but then you can upload a picture of your manicure and then you can post it to a friend and then it will kind of be a social media. It doesn't work like that. The world doesn't work like that. Whatever works for you, adapt. And don't be afraid to change your initial business model 3, 4, 5, 6 times until you get it right. So what I didn't do, I didn't code my app. And this is a funny thing in technology. When you think about an architect, you wouldn't expect an architect to lay the bricks of their own building. And yet when it comes to technology, if you work in tech, they expect you to code. It makes sense, I understand it. I speak code the same way that I speak French. If I went to France, I can order a coffee. I can kind of see what you're saying and I can maybe get some directions, but I can't speak it fluently. As long as I have a basic understanding of the language of what I'm supposed to be talking about, I didn't need to sit and code. It's time consuming. I would have had to have gone back to university to study this in depth. And quite frankly, why do something yourself when someone else is an expert at it? If you've got funds to do it, utilize them. It's a good use of your money. So how to make a great app. This was my sort of 5 steps to success. Fast. How many times have you ever been on Careem or Uber or any of the apps that we sort of use on a day-to-day basis, and it's been so slow to load that you just close it and you just call the number? It has to be fast constantly. If you're going to spend money on anything, spend money on a really, really good developer who can get your app working quickly. Secondly, make it free. Unless you're Kim Kardashian and you're sort of charging for behind-the-scenes pictures of photo shoots and things like that, make your app free. Everything's free. You can always upsell. You can always upcharge for a new package or an added feature or whatever it is. But for your numbers as well, when you first start, and numbers that you want to show to investors of how many people are using, keep it simple, keep it smart. Know your audience. So Beam was for women. So I don't know if you know this, but women swipe, men tap. Women swipe, men tap. It's important that I knew that, because when I was designing my app, I made it much more accessible for women by, although there are obviously buttons you could tap, you could also swipe. And if you swiped, maybe it would direct you to tap at something. But the whole of Beam could be done, and I made this specifically, with one finger. You can swipe through the whole of Beam with one finger. So if you're holding a baby in one hand, or you're typing, or whatever it is you're doing, with one hand, you can book an appointment through Beam. From research. Really, really had to research little important things that if I didn't do, I mean, it wouldn't have been a success. And because I did do those things, this is a small snippet of the coverage that we had just in the first 3 months. So just to be clear, I didn't pay for a dirham of this. It's all free. And it's all because what I did was I came to women on a very personal level and I said, I built this for you. This problem that you had that maybe you didn't talk about that much, but at some point you sort of felt it was a bit of a grievance. I made this personally for you. Please enjoy. I didn't try and market it by calling women, sassy females. You need to download this, etc., etc. I went woman to woman and said, hey, you need this. And that's the easiest way to do it. So useful tools for me. Canva, HubSpot, their blog specifically is amazing. Envato Market, Fiverr, Remember the Milk, Edgar, and Sacido. Out of all of them, I think the 2 most important that I want to highlight is Fiverr, where anyone will create something for you for $5. So not the terrible logo that I showed you, but about 2 logos after that, did it on Fiverr. Last-minute graphic designs, when your graphic designer's not answering their WhatsApp and you've got a presentation or whatever it is, Fiverr. If I wanted to create a GIF for my Instagram, Fiverr. All of it, $5. Obviously, they have package upgrades, but in general terms, everything was $5. The second one is Remember the Milk. Remember the Milk is the it's the website I wish I had created myself. It's literally a website where you write your task list and you tick things off. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot. It's so simple. It's so genius, because how many times have you written things down in a diary and then you've left the diary, or you don't have a pen, or you forgot to cross it off, or you've got to open the diary? Having that tab open and being able to cross things off also gives you a sense of satisfaction. That really, really helped me at the start. So, leaving Beam behind, we're going to talk about women in STEM, which again is science, technology, engineering, and maths. So this is a global statistic. For every 1 woman studying STEM, there are 5 men. Now, there are a lot of theories as to why this is the case. One of the most interesting ones that I read about was that it starts about age 10 or 11, and it's something called your STEM identity. So by about 10 or 11, you're starting to perceive yourself and the world around you, and you're starting to fit yourself into categories. Now, at that age, young girls are either consciously or subliminally being told that it's the brainy ones, the smartest kids in the class, that go into technology. And that's not the case. Anyone can go into technology. I did, and I have no degree, no background, nothing like that in technology. Mine's completely offline. But this is the case. So it really starts from the ground up. This is one of my favorite quotes. Edna Hoover said this. So when I was hired, the glass ceiling was somewhere between the basement and the sub-basement. Obviously, you know the term glass ceiling. It's to do with gender equality. It's to do with women in the workplace and sort of breaking the boundaries. So by 2020, 77% of all jobs will require tech experience. I don't want to be in the 23% that don't, because I imagine they're not going to pay very well. I'm struggling to think what doesn't involve tech nowadays. Everything involves tech, whether, again, you're an architect, whether you're a vet, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a dancer. Some part of your life involves technology. So how can we take the stigma out of STEM? These are two of my favorite people in the world. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So on the right-hand side, we have Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace is one of the first computer engineers in the world. Nobody taught you about her at school, ever. On the right-hand side. Never learned about her at school. One of the first computer engineers in the world. Incredible, incredible woman. On the left-hand side is Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was a very famous actress in the 20s. She was also one of the first women to have a patent because she invented a system that allowed frequencies to jump between radio stations. At the time, everything was communicated via radio, and allowed different frequencies to jump between radio stations so that the line wasn't being dropped as often. Two incredible women. So if your dream is to save the environment, become an athlete, open a business, travel the world, design, teach, entertain, whatever your industry is, you either now or will in the very near future, i.e. by 2020, need technology in your life. So these are some statistics about social media. So KakaoTalk is the 20th most popular social media platform in the world, the 20th, right at the bottom, and it still has 49 million active users. It would take you 5 million years to watch every video that will be shared every month until 2019. And there are 6 billion people watching videos daily on Snapchat. This is technology. This is around us constantly. Who wouldn't want a piece of this? This is incredible. These numbers are phenomenal. The connectivity that we have nowadays is incredible. So to end with the same quote that I started, it's not that we use technology, it's that we live technology. This is a part of your everyday life. The quicker you embrace it, the quicker that you realize that you don't need to be a Mark Zuckerberg, a Marissa Mayer, a Steve Jobs. You can just have an everyday degree, an everyday the better it will be. Thank you so much. Yeah.
When you say tech experience, what exactly does that mean that we should have?
That you should have or that I should have?
That I or we, you had mentioned that everyone should have tech experience by 2020. So what exactly is that?
Well, everyone will have technology involved in their job in some way by 2020. So that could mean either, say, from my background, it would be print going online, having a website. It would be, for a lot of ways, data. So if you think about as a business, if you think about your customer. So an offline customer walks into a shop, buys an apple, and leaves. What do you know about them? Maybe you've seen them on CCTV. Maybe you can sort of gauge their age or what gender they are. That's as much as you know about them. That same customer buys something online. You know what time they logged on, which browser they used, how long they took, what else they put in their basket, then removed, what they paid with, whether they did cash on delivery, whether they did credit card, etc., etc. All of this data is being more and more integrated into our everyday life. And that's one of the main ways how technology will infiltrate everything by 2020.
I came a bit late, so I might have missed it, but I didn't hear you mention who specifically built your app and who designed it, or if it was you.
It was not me. It was not me. That was one of the first decisions that I made, was that either I'm going to go to school for another 2+ years and learn how to make an app, or I'm going to find someone who's really, really good at it, and I'm going to pay them to do it. So again, on the subject of failure, the first thing I did was I hired a team in India. They did not get it. It was not good. It was a waste of money. It was a mess. The second thing I did was found a freelance web developer who'd come recommended to me through a friend that I'd learned from going to all of these sort of tech events and things like that. I basically said, who do you use and can I use them? I really like your app. And they said, yes, here's his name, here's his card. And for the last 2 years, his name's Mohammed. He was my developer, designer, and ended up being a very, very important part of Beam because he wasn't one of 20 people working on 20 different apps. He was one person who would come to, wherever we were working from, whichever cafe, and kind of sit and talk through it with me. And I think that's definitely the way to do it.
Yeah. I loved your presentation. It was awesome. I wish so many more people were in here. I want to ask about bloggers.
Yeah.
What advice can you give bloggers? If you were to start a blog, what website would you recommend? What ways to
succeed?
Promote yourself?
Yeah,
exactly. And more on like writing nonfiction specifically, not just on talking about trends.
Okay, so for a blogger, number one, use WordPress. It's the favorite for a reason. It's so easy. It's great to use. Number two, the most important thing about having a blog is coming up in Google search. Search engine optimization is the most important. You might have the best blog in the world. If no one knows about it, what's the point? It's dead content. So invest in things. You can get plugins like Yoast, for example, which is something that I've used in the past, which will actually, WordPress does this to a certain extent as well, which will go through your content and it will show you what your headline looks like when it comes up on Google. It'll show you your meta tags, your descriptions, etc., etc. So stuff like that, if you from day one really pay attention to it, really take a keen interest in search engine optimization, it's going to yield the best results for your blog. It's going to yield the best traffic because people will be able to find you.
Okay. Can I ask my question? I'm here.
Oh.
Okay. So applications like Careem and Uber, like the most popular ones in terms of transportation, they actually have like offices.
Yeah.
In terms of Beam and in terms of your experience, what's the ratio with virtual work as opposed to really being physically in an office? Or is it even required?
It's a really good question. So I'm trying to find a way to put this. If you're Careem and Uber, you need an office because you're dealing with that many employees, et cetera, et cetera. If you've got 10 employees or less, work from a cafe. It is a huge overhead to have an office here. Rent, DIWA, internet connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't facilitate when you can go to Starbucks and pay 20 dirhams and use their Wi-Fi. And again, coming back to investors, whether you think you need it now, eventually, I promise you, you will need an investor at some point, again, whether it's a bank or it's a person. They're going to look at this stuff and they're going to be like, why have you had this wonderful AC'd office from day one? You don't need it. Whatever you can cut. That's another point about freelancers, actually. I didn't mention this, but Mohammed, who's my developer, was freelance. I never gave him a visa. I never gave him health insurance. He was never under my license. He's freelance. I saved money doing that. If he's happy to work freelance, he has his own visa, which he did. Take advantage. Cut corners wherever you can. Obviously not on the product, but on things like using Fiverr for a graphic designer rather than paying someone 200-300 dirhams to do a flyer for you. It's the best way to do it. Done? Thank you.